The final rays of sun bled through the dense canopy, painting long shadows across the forest floor. Elias checked his watch. 6:17 p.m. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at him. He was hopelessly lost, his phone dead, and the approaching darkness felt like a tangible threat. He'd been so sure of the trail, so confident in his navigational skills. Now, surrounded by towering pines and the ominous rustle of unseen creatures, his confidence lay shattered. He stumbled onward, the fading light turning the familiar forest into a menacing maze. Then he heard it. A faint, rhythmic tapping, like a woodpecker, but somehow off. It was too regular, too insistent. He paused, heart pounding, listening intently. The tapping grew louder, closer. He pressed himself against the rough bark of a giant oak, his breath catching in his throat. Through a gap in the trees he saw it. A figure, hunched and still, bathed in the last sliver of twilight. It wasn't human. Tall and gaunt, with limbs that seemed impossibly long and thin, it sat motionless, its head bowed, the rhythmic tapping continuing, emanating from something it held in its hands, a small, intricately carved wooden clock. Elias watched, paralyzed by fear and a strange sense of foreboding, as the figure raised its head slightly. Its face was hidden in shadow, but he could see 2 points of light, glowing with an unnatural intensity. The tapping stopped. Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. Then, the figure turned its head, and Elias saw it. Not a face, but a perfectly smooth, featureless surface, reflecting the last of the fading light. It was as if the figure itself was made of polished ebony, reflecting the dying light with terrifying clarity. The clock in his hand seemed to glow faintly, its hands moving with unnatural speed. As the last vestiges of daylight vanished, the figure rose, its long limbs stretching out, and Elias felt a wave of icy terror wash over him. He turned and fled, the sound of his own ragged breathing the only sound in the deepening silence of the forest. He ran blindly, stumbling through the undergrowth, until he finally stumbled upon a barely visible path. He didn't stop running until he reached the edge of the woods, the lights of civilization a beacon in the encroaching darkness. He never looked back, never forgot the figure, the clock, and the unnerving feeling that he hadn't been alone in the forest. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that the clock was counting down to something, and he was somehow involved.